Reports indicate a quickly declining social trust. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. Science Direct put out an article highlighting a study which tried to explain the declining levels of social trust that we see in America. Now, I believe the lessons here also apply to Canada and many other countries in the world. It's not only in America where we see this decline in social trust. Now, before we move on too far though, I want to begin by defining what that is. What is social trust? Broadly speaking, it can be defined as something that facilitates cooperation between strangers, thus reducing transaction costs in situations involving uncertainty. That's what the article uses at least. Now, here are some examples to maybe give you a better idea. If somebody within a particular context doesn't trust that you're going to play fairly based on your cultural norms and laws, then they will be reluctant to cooperate with you. This manifests in many ways. So, example being, maybe you're a landlord and you have a tenant. If you don't trust them to pay rent when it's due, every month they'll be trying to stall, and they'll be okay with you taking them to court because they know it'll take a long time and they can collect free rent during those months that it takes to get through the system. Well, you as a landlord may be reluctant to engage in a trust-based relationship. You may be inclined to do things like hire an escrow agency and do all of these extra things here to supplement that lack of trust. Now, maybe let's say you live in a society where you don't trust your neighbors to abide by the law. A low social trust in that regard. Maybe your home, you feel like it has to be defended now. So you're very in favor of things like more guns, you owning assault-style weaponry, all of these things. Maybe every house in your block has to have a 10-foot high fence now, electric barbed wire, whatever it is, things that you are taking as a precaution because you lack that trust in your neighbors and society. And further from this, there is also a consequence there. When you don't trust your neighbors to help you, you are unlikely to help them. You're not viewing each other as allies anymore, as country people. You're viewing each other as these individuals with competing concerns. You're all striving for one thing, and your victory means their loss. It's a zero-sum game. So, if there are things like social issues and whatnot, you'll be very unlikely to get involved if it doesn't directly impact you. And that's not a recipe for success in a country, especially one that is so diverse as America or Canada. To me, there is no doubt that social trust, or more simply cooperation between citizens, has declined. You can most easily see this across party lines in politics, the left and the right. For all intents and purposes, they are at war with each other. The fact that they see the other side as an enemy, and the way they're talking about each other, it's not conducive to a proper and functioning government. It's actually quite the opposite. They take every chance they get to slander the opposition, to make themselves look better, even though they both have massive flaws of their own. And it would be beneficial for them to work together and iron these things out, but they take the opposite approach, the combative one. And it doesn't bode well for cooperation and getting things done at the governmental level. To have that as your fundamental relationship is not good. If the government, we suppose that their job is to act in the best interest of the citizens, well, it's hard to do that when, if something is even the slightest bit controversial, it can't be talked about, it can't be passed, and you have no hope of getting support from the other party, from the other side of the aisle. Now, it's literally the job of politicians to work together and figure out what's best for the country, but they can't do that. The only way things really get done, especially in Canada, is if the government wins a majority in the House and everywhere else so they can get their things passed without much issue. If it's a minority government, and even in America, if you have to rely on the cooperation of the other party, that's becoming more rare and rare every year. Now, there used to be a time where maybe not the politicians per se, but the average citizen would view their counterpart, the opposite ideology individual, someone who is a liberal or a conservative, depending on what you are, the opposite of that. You'd view that individual as somebody who still had good intentions, but the path they saw going forward was slightly different. They had a different idea, but the goal was still the same: to make Canada the best it can be, to make America the best it can be. And even though you differed on how exactly to get there, You guys had a compatible aim, and therefore working together, it made sense. You want this, I want that, we can negotiate. But today, though, it's very different. Many of the parties mistrust each other, and that has leaked into the citizenry. People mistrust each other based on politics. They don't see the opposition as people who want to make the country as good as it can be. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They view those people as detractors. People who want to destroy the country, want to do this and this and that. There's a whole list of bad things they're up to. Conspiracy theories, exaggeration, slander, and with all of that, it really is no wonder that social trust has declined when the other half of the country is seen as an enemy, and your in-group is all that you can focus on. Of course you're going to be having these feelings here. You feel like you're surrounded by enemies, and that's not good. Now, let me get back to the study. I will say, I'm just going to summarize their findings. I do welcome you to review the entire document if you're interested. But essentially, the study established that in the US, there's definitely been a substantial decline in social trust in the recent decades. And I would wager, as I said before, that is true for many other Western countries as well. Now, the burning question is why? Why do we see these declines? The study finds that about half of the decline is attributable to two factors: worsening confidence in public institutions and income dissatisfaction. The report started by saying political institutions at first, and later they flipped and they're just talking about institutions broadly. And that's a very important distinction. They're not the same thing. Not all public institutions are supposed to be political. In fact, it's the opposite. Very few of them are supposed to be. But that is shifting. An institution can broadly be defined as a unit in the public sphere that is supposed to serve the public by advising on or providing a societal good. Now you have health, you have news and media, you have education, you have the government itself, all of these things. Now, some are inherently political, like the government, while others should not be, like health. And then you have the middle ground with the media. Of course, it's very clear some are very political. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Debatable. When it comes to health, though, of course it should not be political. And the government, that's inherently political. So you have the whole spectrum wrapped up in there. Yet what we see today is a growing trend of politicizing everything across all institutions. And here I'll be injecting my own observations. I'm going to deviate from the article a bit because I have some theories as to why this is happening. And I want to start by diving into the institution argument. Why has that eroded so much trust? Fundamentally, I do think many of the institutions that we see have destroyed themselves. They've taken measures and actions to ensure that the average person is going to be questioning how trustworthy they are. And here's one example. Take public health institutions in America, maybe even some in Canada. They rightly claimed that anti-mask rallies are dangerous because they act as super spreader events. They were condemned rightly. There's lots of people gathering together closely in tight spaces during a pandemic needlessly. There's no reason to do that. It's a bad idea. I agree with them. But here's the crazy part. Right after they do that, those same institutions have nothing but praise for protests and rallies about social justice causes. That is a massive inconsistency oozing with politics. The virus doesn't care why you're gathering in large numbers in close proximity. Whether it's an anti-mask rally or a social justice cause, if one is bad, the other is too. From a public health perspective, that's the correct answer, but they took this convoluted approach to try and come across as woke. It was horrible, and people noticed that. There was a clear bias where there should not have been. Certainly, this is a non-political topic, but they made it political. And further, I do wonder, how many cases and further deaths are attributable to all those mass social justice protests in America? It's a valid question. I do wonder what the number is. And of course, you can compare that to the anti-maskers. I'm not trying to defend them. I think that was a horrid idea. But, as an institution of the public, if you're going to say gathering in large groups to protest whatever is a bad idea during a pandemic, you have to be consistent. And here, they failed. Then at the same time, sticking with the public health institutions, at the beginning of the pandemic, they started off by saying masks are horrible, don't wear them, they'll do nothing. You can look it up. It's public knowledge. That was the going advice. Then, as the pandemic went on, they changed their tune to say it's essential now. It's not about being wrong here. That's fine. Everyone is wrong once in a while, and institutions are no different. It's how they handle it, though. There was little to no recognition or open discussion as to why they landed in the wrong ideological spot. Why did they get it so wrong? Masks are not a new invention. They've been around for a long time. Why did they have no idea whether or not a mask would help curb these viral spreads? It seems kind of silly for a public health institution to have no idea about this age-old technology and the effects it would have. And when they changed their tune, there's no discussion there. Why were you wrong? Why are you right now? And that confusion led to so many people being confused. Now, there are individuals who refuse to wear a mask, and they're actually following public health guidelines of, March or April in 2020. Of course, they're wrong. It's outdated. It's no longer relevant. But not having the proper discussion leads to that confusion. The institutions here have many faults, and it's not just public health. You can look at the media. Incredibly polarized, getting stories wrong and not walking them back depending on the subject matter. Showing a clear bias, is that good for public trust? I don't think so. You can turn to any of these institutions and expose fallacies and contradictions within them. We can even move on to something like educational institutions, which are ripe with political ideology. Certain debates and topics can't even be talked about without fear of cancellation. At the university, the institution that was once there to stand for free speech, growth, free thinking, and debate has shrunk to an echo chamber. And that's broadly speaking. Not every discipline is the same, but that's what we're seeing here. Then you pair that with the nonsensical costs they're charging, the crazy administration fees, and once again, it's not really a mystery why many people are losing trust here. Are you going to university to be indoctrinated or to learn? Two different things there, and the lines are blurring. Now, the main issue I've highlighted here with these institutions, among many, is the non-political ones are increasingly becoming partisan, and they're doing it very poorly. Why? Well, they have no spine. That's what it looks like to me. They themselves fear being attacked by the woke mob if they do not adopt these woke stances. So, they have infused the ideology into their mission. They become political. They have let a vocal minority scare them into abandoning their fundamental mission. If it's health, stick to health. If it's education, stick to that. But the goals are blurring, and people are questioning that, and they're losing trust. The woke mob and the ideology they espouse is not some type of infinitely good thing. It is very debatable, and a lot of things that come out of that group are questionable, to say the least. But to have that infused into the systems that are supposed to safeguard the public, well, to put it lightly, the reality of that is not lost on the public. Whether it's Canada or America, of course it's going to be a hot topic. If social trust is something we want to prepare, these public institutions are at the heart of that. The onus is on them to show the citizens why they deserve to be trusted, and thus far I cannot applaud their efforts. They've done the opposite. They've been showing you why they cannot be trusted, because they flip and they flop, they can't stand up to criticism, they can't even hold true to their mission statements. Whether it's to be the place of education, which involves things like free debate and free speech, they can't do that anymore. Whether it's the health institutions, which should be giving unbiased, unpartisan health advice, they are seemingly not doing that either. It's a problem. Now, of course, because we are in a critical discussion here, I'm highlighting some of the flaws, and that's not to say the entire institution is corrupt. I do think they still do many things that are good, but you're seeing this thing spread, though, this infection, and it has to be halted or at the very least discussed publicly so we can figure out as a people where we want to go. Of course, public health, I think overall in Canada has done a good job, especially compared to other countries. They have the mishaps with the mask and stuff like that. Those are the flaws, but nothing really is perfect. But still, the flaws deserve to be talked about because we want to make things better. As I referenced before, our goal as citizens should be to make Canada the best it can be. We can differ on how to do that, But as long as we agree about the goal and we recognize that in other people, we should be fine. But unfortunately, we can't even see that. We see glimmers of destruction and malice in other people who don't share our thinking. And once again, I keep saying it, that's another major problem. Now, the study also goes on to cite income dissatisfaction as another major factor here, and that's understandable given the current economic climate. Inequality is an issue, but it has a lot of nuance to it, as I've spoken about before. Fundamentally, though, broadly speaking, if you are struggling, you have very little time to dedicate to manifesting social trust. In fact, the very situation that you find yourself in, being relatively poor, that can taint your interpretation of the society you find yourself in and further reduce social trust. Why trust the government or the institutions? Do they even care about you? The reality of your situation tells you something. It seems like they aren't helping you. Whether they are or they're not, you're still in dire straits. These are the types of thoughts that can manifest, and you can see how they would reduce social trust. Now, some of the underlying issues here are things like the stagnation of wages and the changing markets. So, productivity has not been properly tracked to inflation. People have become more productive, but wages are not scaled with that. As a whole, the workforce earns less real dollars per unit of production now than they did in the 90s. Inflation and things like that skyrocketed, but wages grew very slightly. Although you certainly live a higher quality of life today, due to tech and health advances and such, you still don't make as much. As an employee, it's very likely you have not reaped the benefits of this increased productivity, but the C-suite executives and the stockholders have. So maybe things could be a little bit better balanced there. I'm open to that discussion and that argument. Now, there is something else that has happened too. You have these corporations not needing as many manual labor employees anymore due to things like AI, machines, better factories, etc. There is a push to increase minimum wage, and I understand where that's coming from, but there's two sides to it, like with everything. Does it influence companies to just cut these jobs and just go all in on AI? It's a question worth studying, and here's a very crude example. So let's say you have cashiers, and we've seen it happen. Before, you could have maybe 10 cashiers operating the checkout, and maybe they made $10 each per hour. Now the minimum wage goes up to 15, and Walmart's going to do the cost benefit analysis there. It adds up. They're paying more money. Would it be better to invest that in the self-checkout machines and you have one clerk there who oversees everything? So we make the minimum wage $15 an hour. It's great for the one clerk who was kept on, but now the other 9 have been terminated because you only need the one to operate the machines. If we're talking about minimum wage in this context, you have to look at the corporation's incentives too. Of course, we're not stopping any AI machine takeover by not touching the minimum wage, but we could certainly accelerate it. The more incentive you give to the company to do away with the employee, the faster they're going to find the alternatives to do that. The incentive there is cost saving, and the corporation's job is to make money. So it is something to be accounted for. Fundamentally, I do believe something like Andrew Yang's UBI proposal can help here, a universal basic income, where you'll pay citizens a certain amount every month and it provides a floor for them. You will under no circumstance make less than this. It will keep you afloat, it will keep you alive, and you're free to work more to get those extra luxuries in this world. Now, I've spoken at length regarding the topic. It's no miracle cure, like maybe Yang presents it to be. In fact, it can be a disaster if not implemented correctly. There are many considerations there, but if done properly, I do think it can dramatically change everyone's life for the better. If you're interested in that topic, I would recommend listening to my comprehensive discussion on it. I think it must have come out maybe a month ago, because there's a lot of nuance there and too much to lay out today. UBI is not as simple as just handing out money and checks to people. There is a balancing aspect to it, the government budget. There's the political discussion. Should it be at the control of the president, of the politicians, or an independent body, like the Bank of Canada? What are we going to do philosophically when people are finding themselves out of work? Lots of things to consider there. Now, the bottom line here is that I think much of the mistrust we see today can be remedied by a combination of institutions getting their act together and also introducing something like a UBI, a better social security net. It sounds simple, just these two things here, but implementation is the real challenge. How do these institutions undo all the damage they have caused here by their very actions? How can we work out the budget to institute a national UBI system anytime soon? All of these questions are worth asking, and it is crucial that we try to figure out how to get to the bottom of it. If social trust continues to decline, we will not have a country anymore. Citizens are united under one flag, and it allows us to work and coexist peacefully. Once you don't trust your neighbors to uphold that bargain, chaos breaks loose as people are forced into only considering their own selfish interest. If you think things are bad now, you have not seen anything yet. We need to get our act together, or the implosion of many Western countries will continue. We've already seen that. So much turmoil, so much division, and it is somewhat ironic. The truth is, aside from COVID, of course, we do live in one of the best time periods, if not the best, to exist as humans. Humans have been around for a very long time. Millions of years going through evolution, and only in the past couple hundreds of years can we say things have been good, relatively speaking. We've gone from things like living in pure destitution. The masses never had anything good for them going. Today, things are getting better. Of course, there's still poverty and whatnot, but we're actually getting close to eradicating it based on UN metrics. Many people actually have a shot at making something of themselves these days. Technology is at a point where it's rapidly getting better every year. Healthcare is expanding at a crazy rate. People are living longer. Only recently have we seen things start to turn backwards, and many of that is our own doing. People not properly respecting where we are, not trying to uphold our standard. People actively trying to undermine the institutions and the policies that got us to where we are today. Of course, we can still do so much better, but there is a risk of making things worse too, and that has not been accounted for. You have people who are steering the political ship in Canada and America and wherever, the politicians, the president, the prime minister, and you also have individuals who are steering the cultural ship. I do fear for the cultural side of things because politics, I do feel, is a byproduct of the culture. Now, where is the culture? Who is dominating it? It seems to me that it is those same woke people who are doing a lot of the damage here, who are tainting the way the masses are viewing things, and it seems that logic is not being held in high regards, and there's a lot of issues that are coming out of here. And we're seeing it fall downstream into the political sphere. We've seen it fall downstream into the institutions. If the culture was stronger, and we did uphold these liberal values of freedom of speech, free thinking, true inclusiveness, not what we've seen with the cancel culture mayhem and whatnot, I think we'd be in a far better place. The institutions would not be crumbling the way they are now if the culture was strong. If we're talking about first causes here, culture is where many of the changes have to occur. And it's hard, because a lot of these individuals, part of the woke mob, have weaponized things like social media. You want to talk out against them, you're canceled. There's a risk of your life being destroyed. You're going to be bullied and stuff like that. It's a true bastardization of many liberal values once again, and it's funny to me always when I see people like that, who are claiming to be tolerant and of the left and stuff like that. They have no idea what they're talking about. It's not true liberalism. It's actually more akin to authoritarianism. You not sharing the opinion as them, then you're finished, you're going to be taken out. And to not see that contradiction is further proof of the delusion that many of these individuals have, and I don't think it's the majority. It's a vocal minority who is steering the ship. And it's hard to fight back against them because of the way they've organized their efforts. I do not think the current day culture is going to lead us to a place where social trust begins to flourish again. It's quite the opposite. It's led us down a path of destruction, and it will continue to do so. It's really on us as the individuals to stand up and get these critical conversations going, to talk about some of the faults of the system and the ideologies that we're seeing so present in today's world. If we fail to do that, well, we're at the mercy of the current tides, and I do think a change has to occur for us to get to where we really want to be. A united vision of a better Canada. So with that, I do think it brings us now to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoy the content, be sure to leave a review and share. That'll help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.